Good morning and welcome to our CalRTA webinar on the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. My name is Susie Dixon and I'm the State Chair of Government Relations for the California Retired Teachers Association. It's my pleasure today to welcome all of you, though I can't see you. I see quite a list of attendees, and so that's exciting. What I do want to do is a little housekeeping first. As you have already noticed, you're all muted, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If you have questions during the presentation or at the end, you have a question box. If you could type your question in there, I'm going to address most of those at the end. We do have time for questions. And if we aren't able to get to it, there will be a survey coming to your email in a couple of days where you can add additional questions. I do want to tell you initially, though, I am not going to profess to be the expert on the WEP GPO history and why and when and where it has affected everyone over the last 30 years. I do, though, know that so many of our members and public servants have been affected and will continue until we get these unjust penalties repealed. We have an expert. His name is David Walrath, and at the end of the slideshow, I have his email, and I will also be able to send that to you. If you have legislative questions or something about the history that I'm not able to address, David's always willing and loves legislation, so he'll be there. So I'm going to shut off my camera and begin. And again, welcome all of you. And this is also a recorded webinar. So in a week or so, you'll be able to go on and access any links or anything that you may have forgotten to look at. Here we go. So first of all, as I said, this is about the government relations presentations for the Social Security and penalties, the windfall elimination, and the government pension offset. A little trouble. Sorry, I'm trying to get my slideshow to move forward. Okay. As usual, there we go. All right, today, main topics we're going to talk about is, first of all, what is the windfall elimination provision? When did it become the law and why? And as you notice on a lot of publications, there are the initials WEP. That just stands for the windfall elimination provision. Who is affected by the windfall elimination provision? Secondly, what is the government pension offset? When did it become law and why? Who is affected by the government pension offset? What is the estimated cost of repeal of the two individual penalties and of combined? What is CalRTA doing to repeal the WEP and the GPO? And most importantly, what can you do? Before we go into what the windfall is, we need to kind of go back and think about when Social Security was signed into law and why. Under FDR in 1935, the Social Security Act was signed to provide income security. And we keep wanting to go back to those key words, income security. Taxes were collected for the first time in January of 1937 to allow to have the Social Security payments go out that same month. In 1935, the law was changed to add survivor benefits and benefits for the retiree spouse and children. In 1956, disability benefits were added. But we're going to go back to that spousal benefit later on when we talk about the GPO. Again, what is the windfall elimination provision? Part of a Social Security reform of 1983 was to remove an unintended advantage of workers who received a pension from a non-paying Social Security employment, such as our teaching profession in California or other public service where they did not pay into Social Security, but they had a private pension. And then they also may have been a second income or a second career worker where they did pay into Social Security employment. As a result of this, the unintended consequences is someone who becomes a second career worker or has to work in two jobs, as in many of our states where teaching salaries or public service salaries are not as, I say ours are adequate, at least in California. Many of them actually work second jobs throughout the year. So they're two income workers. The effect of the WEP, though, is very proportional, and I'll go over that when we go through this graph. They call this a windfall. Ronald Reagan signed it into law, but I don't think a lot of our elected officials saw the consequences that would come later on. The windfall elimination provision affects public employees in all 50 states. And the key again we want to profess is these are earned benefits. Who is affected by it? You can see as of December 2019, 1.9 million Social Security beneficiaries are affected by the WEP. It affects those who work for a state or local government who did not pay into Social Security and they receive a government pension. And then they also worked and paid into a profession where they paid into Social Security. The WEP affects a person's earned Social Security benefits. Keyword, earned. If you look, the maximum Social Security reduction is shown in this chart. If you have 20 years or less, the less you've earned, for example, in a California public school pension, if you have less than 20 years, even though you've met those 40 plus quarters, your maximum reduction can be up to $480 a month. It goes down to zero if you've paid in for 30 years. I'm not sure how many of us could have taught full-time and worked into a private sector job for 30 additional years at the same time. So the penalty is the most extreme for all of us who have the least number of years paid into Social Security. To find out how much your penalty is personally, you need to go to this penalty, calculate your penalty on the Social Security government benefits retirement planner WEP. And those are all going to still be on this slideshow. If you look, you can see if you were first looking at 20 years or fewer, your maximum penalty again is $463. Personally, I'm affected by both of these penalties. And when I figured mine, I'm losing close to 49% of my minimum Social Security that I will receive at 61.5. That's a key amount of money for retirees, especially a retired teacher in California. If they have had a second job and met those numbers, right there could be the difference for their deductions in Medicare and healthcare expenses. The WEP really is affecting the national efforts to recruit second income earners. We have a high need for teachers in the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, and math. Because we've done such a great job the last few years of educating our public and workers and those coming in about these penalties, it really has put a halt on a number of people who say they want to be able to switch in their later years to become a public school teacher. The government pension offset is the other Social Security penalty that we're talking about today. This is the one that was enacted in 1977, again as part of a Social Security amendment. This was signed by President Jimmy Carter. It began treating a public pension as if it was a Social Security benefit and penalizing those who received that private public pension. Today, at least 74% of those who are affected by the GPO are women who lose their entire spousal benefit. The spousal benefit came into, if you recall, to the Social Security in the early part of 1939. It was intended to assist, especially women, to keep them out of poverty because they were financially dependent on their husband. Until probably 30 years ago, most of the households in America had a single income worker, usually a male. So the female, her main job was to stay at home, and she was dependent on her spouse. Once the spouse passed, initially they were unable to collect. So the Social Security survivors benefits were added in 1939. If you think of it today, though, even though we are not a single income family, most of us, it still stands true that because this affects women mostly, the survivor usually has the less yearly annual income. And to have two incomes to survive for their whole livelihood and then retire, if their spouse passes before them, they've lost that second income overnight. And it puts the survivor into a financial crisis and many challenges, as we have heard through the testimonials of many of our members. If you're a recent retiree, we all praise the CalSTRS Defined Benefit Plan. We're so fortunate in California to have a program that provides a decent income. But there's a dark side to that. In California, we have the longest living teachers in the nation. So if you retire in your 60s, you may well live another 40 years. And we have over 100 members on CalSTRS who are collecting the CalSTRS benefit. 100 over 100 years old. So at that point in your life, what you retired on that looked like a decent earning is not, with inflation and cost of living that goes over and above. So once your spouse has passed, that second income is gone, many of our members are thrown into a financial crisis. Who's affected by the GPO? GPO currently affects 900,000 retirees across the 50 states. There are other public workers in all the states, city and local workers, that are affected. But the main teachers that are affected are in 15 states throughout the United States. And you can see I have the list of Alaska, California, Colorado, Connecticut, some school districts, Illinois, Kentucky, some districts, Louisiana, Maine, Massachusetts, Missouri, Nevada, Ohio, and Rhode Island, again, some, don't count, and Texas. These are the ones where we haven't been paying into Social Security while we are a teacher because we have a defined benefit plan. These are the 15 states where when the spouse passes, the GPO is devastating for these members. One of the things that we did a few years ago when we were talking to our elected officials was we presented this, even though it may not have affected their state, it does affect all states in some manner. And the argument that we received was, well, you didn't pay into Social Security. why should you collect your spousal Social Security? So we came up with scenario. Many of you have seen this. This has been a powerful tool, as well as our next slides I'll show you with the cost. But it shows you the comparison of a public sector worker versus a private sector. If you look at scenarios 1, 2, you see that the fully vested spouse in Social Security is the first person at the top. And then the second one is the spouse who worked outside the home and is also vested. So when they retire, if the first spouse gets approximately, we're using a scenario of $27.67 a month, that spouse collects theirs. And the second spouse, if their quarters have not earned them as much as half, they will receive their full amount or 50% of the spousal Social Security. Scenario 2, this is the key. The spouse did not pay into Social Security. We have a single income family in 3 and 4. Doesn't mean that the spouse who stayed at home did not have the opportunities. Maybe they have the privilege of being able to stay home. They have a college degree, but their spouse earned enough for them to stay home and not have those dual income earners. So they, when their spouse retires, their spouse collects the $27.67, that's just a scenario. And then the spouse who didn't qualify and pay into Social Security in the scenario of 2 and 3 receives half of that each month while the spouse is living, for a total of the couple receiving $41.50 and 50 cents each month. Now, if you look at number 4, this is where you have the spouse, the public school teacher, all of you most likely, who did not pay into Social Security and did not have a second job where you qualified for Social Security. You did not have the 40 quarters. So that person retires. They're getting their defined benefit plan. Their spouse is getting their Social Security monthly. Then the offset becomes for $2 for every 3 in pension benefit, which today ends up pretty much, you end up with 0 of your spousal amount. You do not get that on top of the spouse half each month. Then when the spouse dies, you get nothing because they feel you are fine with your defined benefit pension. And scenario 5 is showing where the WEP affects any of us who've also paid into Social Security. You've earned your 40 quarters. You are now penalized, as you saw in that graph, close to up to 50% of what you earn. So if you're eligible for $700 a month on Social Security, you're going to be lucky to get under around 300. Big difference with the cost of healthcare and medicine. What is the GPO mainly? It is a women's issue. We have been pushing this for the last few years with our elected officials. It currently penalizes 79% are women. 74% of those lose all spousal benefits. So if you're looking at your spouse is alive and you look at the amount they collect on Social Security every month, overnight, that will be gone and you'll be surviving on any assets and your defined pension plan. It truly is unjust when you think of the fact that years ago, the idea was to help the surviving spouse stay out of poverty. Another thing that we've said to our elected officials is this drives members into poverty. They then become dependent on federal programs, which cost much more than if they were to receive their earned benefits. We came up with these just this last year. One of our advocates, Jennifer Baker, took the information that we received from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, to show a pie chart of what the cost is. This is a suggestion, actually, from Representative Linda Sanchez when we were in there last October. She said, don't just show the cost. It's scary to elected officials when you talk millions and billions. Show it in an actual percentage. So if you look at the first one, the windfall elimination provision, the annual cost to repeal just the windfall, which affects public employees in all 50 states who have paid into Social Security, 0.13% of the payroll. The annual covered payroll of Social Security, $7 trillion. To repeal for public servants in 50 states, it's only $9 billion, which sounds again like a lot till you look at that pie chart and you can see what the WEP would cost. If you look at the cost of the government pension offset, it is so small you can hardly see that sliver in the graph. The government pension offset, remember, is the one that mostly affects women. The annual cost to repeal is 0.004% of the annual output of Social Security. That's a small amount to keep some members, and especially women, out of poverty. And then we combine the two. What's the annual cost to repeal both? 0.013% of the annual output. This, as our president, Jim Mahoney, has said, is our stimulus plan. You give these earned benefits back to people who have paid into Social Security, or their survivor paid in, or their spousal paid into Social Security, and they receive the survivor benefit. It goes back immediately into our economy. It's really important to note that CalRTA was one of the first organizations to fight for repeal of these unfair penalties. When they were enacted, it took a few years for people to see the negative consequences. This is not unusual with legislation. There's always unintended consequences after something is in place for a few years. But CalRTA started the fight over almost 20 years ago. We have been at the forefront. Just a few examples in the last year, we've had push with March Madness. We've had weekly legislative alerts, our lobby day in Washington, DC. At our convention last year, which was in person, we had the postcard writing. We are presently ending our summer of push, our big push, which focus on the Women's Bipartisan Caucus, representatives who have not co-sponsored, both men and women, and the US senators who have the companion bill, Senate Bill 521. Our leadership, our president, our two advocates, myself, our CEO, and some members who traveled to DC in February, have been holding virtual meetings with out-of-state staff members of the Women's Bipartisan Caucus. We've been able to get a few additional co-sponsors from that. We have updated the website, and we have a virtual toolkit. I'll go over all of these. These are key advocacy activities. Key and most important is, what can you do? As you know, the 116th Congress will be coming to an end in 2020. Currently, the legislation to repeal is H.R. 141. It is a bipartisan bill written by Rodney Davis, a Republican of Illinois. We have been working with his office, and we actually were able to give him a CalRTA award in February and met him in person and assisting him to get this passed. The 116th Congress, one of their first acts was to change the rules for a bill to go to committee and vote. It is now, if you have 290 co-sponsors, then your bill automatically goes to committee and vote. We only need 38 more. Currently today, we have 252 co-sponsors. We have a promise of another one, but I know, don't count your chickens before they hatch, but I'm sure she will be putting it in this week. We need your help to get this done. The key we've been working on in the last few years is using our voice in mass, in person, using the internet, using social media, to be able to educate our Congresspeople and to encourage them to look at this as a key to keep retirees out of poverty. As you know, things changed tremendously in March. The leadership team of Dr. Mahoney, David Walrath, Jennifer Baker, myself, Angelique Hill, Rich Gibson, we had Chuck Denon, one of your directors, we had Clint, we had Lee and Marcia, and Joanne Kopp. We had a group that went to DC to personally request co-sponsors for out-of-state representatives. That always works, but overnight when we got home, things changed, and they changed dramatically. And I was proud to say that the Government Relations Committee has been using virtual meetings for the last 3 years. So we were able to seamlessly go into virtual advocacy. It's been an interesting method to use with our elected officials. I'm finding they actually are more receptive. I think maybe they might be bored, some of their staff members, but we are getting meetings. So we need to continue to let them know through our virtual methods that this is key and the push cannot stop in August. We're revamping our ledge alerts for September and October. I think one of the earliest things that was big promise for us in 2019, when a few of us were in DC in February, after the 116th Congress was just elected and sworn in, our two senators, Senator Harris and Senator Feinstein, had already signed the companion bill, 521. They hadn't done it the session before, and though Senator Feinstein was one of the first senators to write a repeal bill years ago, she had been absent the last couple terms. So that was exciting. It was also good to know that they were doing an in-service on the WEP and GPO to our new Congresspeople. So our messaging about educating and understanding these two penalties was getting through to everyone. I'm going to go through a lot of these things. If you have not, and this is key, what can you do? Sign up to receive the email alerts. I know this summer you were getting 3 a week, but remember, this Congress is coming, the 116th is coming and winding down. So the push is real, it's imperative. Don't just sign up on email alerts. I'm going to show you how easy it is to act on those alerts. Thank you to Debbie Pate Newberry. She is a whiz and she has made it so simple for you to act on these. Look at the advocacy action section on the CalRTA website. We have 6 or 7 areas it's divided into. The resources, materials to distribute, our new virtual advocacy toolkit, what current legislation is, talking points, facts and figures, and a little bit of this and that. It will show you how to schedule a virtual meeting. Contact your division government relations chair. If they would like to set up a virtual meeting, they can go through the state or they can go through myself. The Government Relations Committee has a GoToMeeting account because we are using it on a regular basis. Contact your GRC area representative. We have 12 areas. If you don't know who your GRC area representative is, go on the website or email me. We have an amazing committee that works tirelessly. Schedule a virtual meeting. Most likely it's going to be with the staff, but I will tell you right now, the staff is who educates the elected official. Every time we educate a staff member and they go back to the congressman or woman, 90% of the time they become a co-sponsor. Our elected officials are faced with thousands of bills. So it's up to the legislative staff person to get to them the ones that are important. And guess what? The ones that are important are the ones they hear the most chatter from. When Angelique Hill, our CEO, and I were in DC last October, we walked into an office and the staff member said, oh my gosh, I just am reading an email from a CalRTA member. I think it was Take Action Tuesday. Another thing you can do is tweet, and I'll go over that even more extensively in a few minutes. But if you have not ever tweeted, it is simple. And it is a way you can get a hold of any representative, any politician. You do not have to be a constituent. So I do love to tweet. Again, it's simple. This is the section I was talking about on our website, Advocacy Action. We retooled this last summer to be on the home page. We work with a number of other organizations who are working to get this repeal done. So we didn't want to hide our materials. It's not just for members. The only thing we ask is they don't remove our CalRTA logo, but they use it and they can add their own information. You can go there and see. Again, you can see we say sign up for email communication. That's the key to getting our elected officials to hear us on a regular basis. We'll put a little update. These are the 6 areas that we have on the advocacy action section. When you click on those resources, you're going to find an abundance of materials. You can see our little Twitter there. We have a section on this and that to show you how to set up a Twitter account, how to do the characters, 100, I think it's 130, and then just boom, you follow the person and you send them a tweet. Our email campaign, there's an archive. If you missed it and you want to go and reply and act on an email, you can see here, this is from May. But May 14th, email today, repeal WEP GPO as part of the COVID-19 stimulus bill. Create that idea to include it in a stimulus bill. At the end of March, I contacted the Chief of Staff of Representative Davis's office to check in. What can we do? I know time has been, remember March was an incredibly challenging time. We didn't know what was going to happen. How do we communicate? Our elected officials were going home, trying to work from home as everyone was doing. Well, Rodney Davis tried to put the repeal bill, HR 141, into the first stimulus act. It was so close and yet so far. And I did confirm this with my own elected congressperson, that they were ready to have a number of little provisions in the CARES Act. But if you recall, they were all pulled home and then pulled back overnight because they had to have an in-face vote. And the CARES Act was imperative to get those stimulus checks out and some PPO, some personal protection funds to hospitals and medical facilities. So all of the other things became null and void. But it was, we lose those connections, as my representative said, when you cannot get in the hallway and say, hey, let's make sure this stays in this bill. So we have to act aggressively the next couple of months to be able to try and get it into one of the repeal bills. They're not, I mean, the stimulus bills, they're not going away. As you can see, they're still arguing and trying to come up with solutions for the next one, the HEROES. But it, you know, it still hasn't been settled. So you can go and act on an archive. When you go to, if you, for example, on the left side, you'll see this has Chairman John Larson's staff contact, Nancy Powers Perry. When you click on that, on the right, you see it automatically populates her email address, the subject line, and the message. That again is where I'm telling you, thank you to Debbie Pate Newberry for her magic that she does to make our life easy. Literally, if you had to do these 6, it would take less than, I think, 2 minutes. You sign your name. If you want to add a personal message, you can, but we're making it easy for everyone to advocate each and every time you receive one. Now, if you don't receive this, it's not going to populate. A new thing that we came up this summer with to meet the times was our virtual advocacy toolkit. So as division members, how do you set up a virtual meeting? How do you use Twitter? All of these areas are here for you to access simply. We have a distance meeting checklist. There are little perks and things that are different when you meet virtually, but it's pretty much similar to when you were able to meet in person. So we have the do's and don'ts. It's key that you know the CalRTA platform. We have those 4 areas that we focus on: CalSTRS retirement, Social Security and federal issues, healthcare and healthy aging, and public education. So the Social Security and federal issues, where the WEP and the GPO has been the #1 request and concern from our members the last few years. And the way we find this out is we do an advocacy platform survey. You will be receiving this at the end of September. We do it every 2 years, and it is how the platform is revised and rewritten according to what our members say are the main concerns in their retired lives. We give all of these materials you can download, print. All of this, I think, is imperative. If you do have a virtual meeting, we always send ahead the handouts, the 3 at the cost. We send a CalRTA platform. We do, maybe you can add the myths and facts, but it's important to send ahead to whoever you are meeting with, and most likely a staff member, a lot of our background material. Key here, I know everyone says, why has it taken 30 plus years? Why has CalRTA been fighting for this for 20 years? Well, when you look at everything, it is just the way great things happen. I love the quote of history shows us it takes time for righteous good things to happen. And that's because these were because of dedication, persistence of people. When I did this list, it was profound. It took 70 years to get the states to vote for the 19th Amendment, the right for women to vote. We just celebrated the 100 years. And when I thought of that, my great grandma was alive when I was a child, and I thought she couldn't vote till she was in her late 20s, 30s. The Civil Rights Act took 98 years from the time there was discussion in Congress. Can you believe our first woman senator wasn't until 1922? That's 131 years. Segregation, school segregation, took 177 years from the time it was presented in the Senate and the House to restate that this was not appropriate. Our first woman on the Supreme Court, we can all remember that, 192 years it took. And the first inauguration of an African-American president was 219 years. There's so many more if you study history. It takes many, many years, but it's all worth it. One of my favorite quotes is from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It is the only thing that ever have. And you are that group of thoughtful, committed citizens. We are not just committed to CalRTA. We are committed to all retirees who are facing these unjust penalties that has made it so just such a struggle for so many of our members and for many, many public servants. So we have, and I'm looking at the question box. This is always fun when you're trying to scroll through this. There is a cap. It may have gone up to 463. I thought it was around 408. For the WEP, there is a cap. And let me look. Again, I don't want to go back to the slideshow, but there is a cap. Let's see. I may have to come back to that one because I don't want to. I believe it's gone up to what I put was the most recent, the 463. And that's because a lot of, your incomes have increased over the years. I'm trying to see if there's any more questions here. I know, Bonnie, you have a question. Who is the additional representative? She's from Virginia, representative, and I don't want to go into it too much until she signs, because I would hate to spread the rumor that she definitely is signed when it was a staff member that has agreed to it. I'm not seeing a lot of questions. I don't know, Irene, can you see any more that I'm not seeing? Is Irene back on?
Yes, there are a few good questions. Bonnie also questioned about the pandemic has meant that many retired teachers affected by the offset and have been able to make ends meet by substitute teaching, which they can't do with income schooling. So it's more of a statement of fact of another issue we hadn't considered.
Right, and that's what's affected, the pandemic, and that's something that David and Jennifer addressed in the last webinar with CalSTRS, was now you have retirees who cannot go in and earn that additional money that may just be paying for Part B or something of their Medicare, because they're not comfortable going back in the classroom, or the classroom isn't even open. So
Here's a very interesting question Jeff has submitted. With the potential of many new people in Congress and the White House within the next 2 to 24 or so months, please tell why it's worthwhile to continue emailing current representatives.
Because it's imperative we understand they do have the next few months to continue to make legislation and to add to the stimulus bills, or just to get to the 290 co-sponsors. We are so close. Worst case scenario, if we end 116th Congress and we didn't get those 290, let's say we're 270, we have a list of 270 potential congresspeople that we are going to hit in January. And, you know, Congressman Davis has sponsored this bill the last few rounds. So I'm hoping he again will be someone that immediately starts the sponsorship. He did it in January of 19.
So Bonnie also asked, which I was wondering, how are you choosing the out-of-state senators?
Good question. So what we did is, if you notice, we did a lot of who had not co-sponsored. That was our focus of the big push this summer. Now, now what we've done is we're going to be focusing on the men on Tuesday who have not co-sponsored and women on Thursday. We go Republican and Democrat. The last month, every Thursday, as if you received your alerts today, were to our senators. So we did 15 a week and we hit all senators the month of August to bring that awareness.
So Bryant has asked an interesting question, and it's something we are always challenged with at the state level. When you send advocacy alerts, can you also send mail addresses for those who do not use email?
That's a good question. And you know, it wouldn't be easy to put it on the ledge alert, but if you would like the mailing address, because there is a smaller number, I would be more than happy if you want to email me. It's something I'll bring up with the committee, and maybe we can have a section at the bottom. Key is, when you do mailing, use a postcard. Do not use letters. Letters go through security issues, and they probably won't see them for at least 3 weeks. But postcards, they will put. You know, they don't need to be bonded and test for drugs as much. So,
well, thank you, Mary, for being concerned about our most senior members. And surprisingly, more senior members are getting smartphones. And all of this can be done on a smartphone, but it might take a little experience to do that. Priscilla Porter has a question of, and I'm sure everybody would like to know about this PowerPoint and how they could view this webinar.
This should be on our website under webinars. I would, let's say, give it at least a week, and then you can replay it, the recording. And the slideshow will also be there. So, and when we get, I'm going to be positive, when we get back to in-face meetings, you can always invite one of us to come, and we would do the slideshow with you. And, you know, I do tweak it a lot. We have to stay up to date, but you'll be able to access all of these materials. And also David Walrus email.
Well, thank you very much for that question. And Gail Madison has an important question. She's a statistician. How many attended today? And there were over 50. There were over 80, I believe, registered. And this is typical that people's plans change. and people have come and left throughout the meeting. How many but here's a statistic that Susie probably would have to research. How many emails are sent for each ledge alert?
How many members receive email? I'm confused. What's the question?
How many emails are distributed for each ledge alert?
Well, right now we have, according to Johanna, close to 14,000 database emails. That's out of 40,000 members. That's why we encourage people to sign up. The congressmen and women, the frequency of that is 3 weeks. So you'll notice it's the same ones. The senators was just a weekly. So I kind of answered two parts to that.
So this question from Sharon Rose follows up the previous question. How do you get the list of which members get these emails? Are they selected individually? How does this happen?
That is the database that the CalRTA office has. If you signed up for the email alerts for when you sign up your membership, if you go on, you will see that always check that your email is current. So that comes from you signing up with your email.
So if on the website, there's a place that has your information, and at that point, it's on the members page that you lead to that. And then you can say if you want emails or you don't want them. And if you can't find that, just go to contact us on the on the website and give that information, and it will be taken care of. All right, we have a question from Kayla Meadows. So when the Congress ends, we have to start all over again, right?
Yes, we do. But like I said, we have come so far with this group that we will have a database of supporters that we can just go to immediately and say, we need you to co-sponsor this now. We, as with everything, we were put to a dead stop in March. It was, the momentum was growing, it was gathering. We were so close to 290. But I do really believe if we can get even all of the 50 that we're on today to start acting on those emails and getting our representatives to understand this is time sensitive, if we can get to 290 before October, it goes to committee. And a lot of people, unfortunately or fortunately, they're looking at re-election. So if they know there's a large number of public servants counting on them, it may sway that.
So Barbara Hightower would like to know, when emailing congressional staff.
Oh, I lost you.
Benefits lost, like 73,000?
Okay, you cut out. Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
So, yes. So Barbara would like to know, and I can almost answer this for her. So should she include her personal information about amount of benefits lost? And
yes.
We answered yes.
Yes, I always include what mine will be with the WEP. And then I include what my husband's Social Security, he's paid the maximum for over close to 30 years, that I will lose that also. So it's substantial. And that is a big aha for staff members.
So Jeff Cooper has asked a question that a lot of people don't understand about starting all over with bills. So he wants to know if co-sponsors are not elected, re-elected, what happens?
Then we go after the newly elected. Just like we did. This 116th Congress, as you know, had more freshmen than in the past. And we were able to quickly go to them, and hopefully we'll be able to go straight to DC again, meet them in person, if not virtually, and we will go forward and give our information. And when they hear the keywords earn benefits and they see the small amount that it would cost out of the annual Social Security output, it usually takes most of them a week and they're a co-sponsor. So.
Okay. So Kayla is also a statistician, and she's asked some questions. Probably you can say it's all a guess, but we'll try this. First question, what percentage of our folks, meaning CalRTA members, are not computer illiterate? Second question, what percentage of retired teachers are members of CalRTA?
Okay, I'm not going to go percentage because I don't have my calculator here, but we have just around 40,000 members, but we represent over the 200,000 retired teachers. There's your amount. As far as computer illiterate, I honestly I don't know how we would ever be able to answer that, but I will say probably the positive side effect of the COVID-19 is it has forced many people who are not comfortable with technology to now rely on it. So hopefully more and more. I mean, we're seeing a lot more joining webinars and being engaged.
So Becky Hamilton would like to know, how do we find out how many members are signed up to get these late alerts?
We have about 14,000 out of the 40.
So she's asking how many members in your division. In other words, what people should get hold of to explain the importance of this? How do we know?
I can ask Johanna. You can also email Johanna Hobbs. It's really important that we understand if a person hasn't signed up, they may just be concerned that they think they're going to receive a lot of spam emails and various things, like when you get, Macy's and also Target and everything is tenfold. These are secure emails, and that's why we need to educate our members more. But if they're not comfortable, if you show them how to go to the archive and they can click on it, I will encourage divisions to schedule a meeting, a go-to-meeting with myself and your area representative and your division GRC, and we can do a whole training. So I could do live on the website. And it's one of those things, but if they're not comfortable with technology, they're not going to be on a desktop or a tablet anyway.
So I see that we are getting to the end of our hour, and we just have a few questions.
One more question, and then we will definitely follow through with every question. I do want to assure you. So,
did you want to hear another question?
One more question. I'm trying to see. I see Valerie.
Kayla, excuse me, Kayla Meadows. One cannot, and this is an experience I know you have dealt with, Susie. One cannot forward the legislative alerts without just copying them. Could they be made so that we could just be forwarded?
Do not forward. One of the things, and thank you, Kayla, as we've gone over with the committee. Kayla's on the GRC committee. It is a security protection. So if you forward, you will end up getting kicked off, and many people may end up being kicked off, as I have. What you can do is you could copy the message, copy paste, put it in the body, and then put who you want to send it to, but do not forward. There is a section on the email alert that says forward to a friend. So you have to do it individually. That's the.
All right. So
do you see anything from Brian Valerie? He's had his hand up 34 minutes. I don't seem to be getting
it is there. 2 questions down. and we're getting close to the end. And please, folks, if you have more questions, if you'll be kind enough to write them in the email that you will receive in a day, and they'll be responded to. So we are not taking any more questions online. I will finish the ones we have. This is from this is from Hyman Yip. I have emailed to the Congress people on your list, but I got one notification of unable to deliver. Does someone check to see if these email addresses are no longer valid?
Yes, good question. And I do a test email a week before it goes to Debbie Pate Newberry for the Legislature. So they go through. Here's the clincher though. Sometimes, and not always, but sometimes when they receive a large number of emails, they shut that account down. And that's what happened with one of our senators. They actually, I had met the staff person and they emailed me and said, please take my email off. I'm inundated. Well, you're a public servant. You're supposed to respond. So we did a different way to connect with that person. But it's a good thing. If you are later on in the day or the day later and it's no longer deliverable, they usually shut it down. So, but again, I do want to thank everyone. And Brian, Valerie, I see your hand. If you want to email me, my email is on the website, dixonfamily2@cox.net. We hope to continue to do webinars, and if you want to do one with your division or a small group, just contact me. And again, thank everyone today for joining us, and please be safe and healthy and stay cool, and hopefully a lot of you are not in the fire area. So have a great day, and let's do this. 2 months, we can do this. We've seen a lot happen in less time. So, thank you, and thank you, Irene, for helping out.
My pleasure.